Exposure, keeping you covered weekdays 10 till 5.
Hello, I'm Jade Barber and welcome to my online presentation about station management. Today I will mostly be focusing on exposure. It was an academic project that ran for 3 weeks as a part of the major radio project at the University of Glamorgan. The aim of the project was to run a radio station that emulated a professional station such as BBC Radio Wales. We had to be creative throughout the project, making our own content and ensuring that it was safe to go on air while still making sure that it was interesting and appropriate for our target audience. Similarly to the BBC, we also had set deadlines so that all content was approved by the station management before it could go on air. We each had roles to fill within Exposure. During the running of the project, I was a presenter, producer, co-producer and programme contributor. I was also part of the editorial team and I organised a bake sale which required getting permission from the university a week beforehand. Each of these roles required me to work as a member of a team in order to make sure that Exposure ran smoothly. I will be discussing how well I think Exposure did throughout the presentation. Before we begin, let's have a little look at some of the things that broadcast on Exposure.
Hello, you're listening to The Matinee with me, Rhiannon Bates.
Hello and welcome to Fashion Through the Ages. Today we're going to take a closer look into the 70s.
Yes, that's right, the sassy 70s, a time of disco dancing and funky afros.
Hello and welcome to the final matinee show of Exposure 2013 with me, Lydia Manu, and my lovely co-host, Richard Carey. We've got Curtis on the line now. Hello, Curtis.
Yes, Lydia, how's it going?
Hi, where are you now then?
No radio station would be complete without other competing stations in the local area. Usually here at Glamorgan we have another station which we have to compete with that's actually in the university. Tequila Radio is Glamorgan University's student radio station, based in the Atrium campus, only a short way away from the studios in which Exposure broadcasts. Throughout the year, the society has had over 80 members and broadcasts 51.5 hours a week. This is a clip to show you a little bit of what Tequila Radio is about.
Tequila Radio. Tequila Radio is your student station for events.
I'm Christy, live at the Freshers' Fair.
And we're just kicking off soon 2012.
Interviews.
Hi, this is Steve Lamack and you're listening to Tequila Radio.
I'm Eddie and I went to the same school as David Beckham.
And the best in local music.
And on tonight's show we have Nanook of the North.
We've got Wicket. I think they all studied here at the Atrium as well.
Oh, yeah.
Get involved and listen online at tequilaradio.co.uk.
This year we decided to do things a little differently and work alongside Tequila instead of running against them. This meant that Exposure had another source of online listening as we were broadcasting from the Tequila Radio stream. It also meant that we were potentially increasing our audience as Tequila listeners tuned in to hear Exposure content. The station manager of Tequila Radio has said that although it was a controversial move, it was a positive step in the right direction for both parties, as Exposure had a new streaming outlet and Tequila gained a new partnership with the university, as well as getting a taste of a more structured output than it had previously. The only thing that he would have wanted Exposure to include more of was the promotion of Tequila Radio, as he felt that Exposure did more of a job promoting student newspaper The Phoenix rather than the station which was broadcasting Exposure's output. Even though Tequila Radio is no longer an issue when it comes to competing for listeners, there is still plenty of competition left around. Here are a few clips from stations that Exposure was competing with for listeners' attention.
On FM, AM, online, TV and digital radio, this is BBC Radio Wales.
The Flies in Your Eyes campaign! Do you ever get flies in your eyes? Well, what I propose is that each day for the following week, we each kill a fly. That way, there's 60-something million in this country. And if we all kill a fly a day, that's 60 million flies dying a day. And that's over 7 days. That's a lot of flies. I can't do the maths because it's too complicated. But it's 60 times 7 something, isn't it? Yeah, so I propose everyone kills a fly for Fly in the Eye Day week. Yeah.
The Flies in Your Eyes campaign! Join in the fun and enter your video now at Flies in the Eyes campaign YouTube channel. That's right, film yourself killing a fly and you could win a fly swat. The Flies in Your Eyes campaign!
You heard clips there from BBC Radio Wales and Express, which is Cardiff University's student radio station. We also competed alongside two community stations, Radio Cardiff and GTFM. The community stations were interesting to compare to Exposure because they were the closest in size and seemed to share a similar aim with Exposure to keep the information local and current. Exposure had a team of 66 people and broadcast 7 hours a day. The content was well structured and people worked together in groups in order to make packages of a professional standard. GTFM has a team of 5 paid staff and around 40 volunteers that works to broadcast to the Rhondda area. The station manager at GTFM has informed me that people don't work together to create structured programmes as we did at Exposure. Instead, they work individually on the content for their own shows, with the only structured content being the local news bulletins compiled and presented by a member of staff. I am told that the main reasoning behind this is because of legal liability issues. As a result of everyone working individually, every show sounds different and they follow no pattern. For example, all of the breakfast shows sound different as they have a different presenter every day. Radio Cardiff works in a similar way to GTFM with only a few paid members of staff and everyone else that contributes to the station being volunteers that work individually on their own shows. Again, the only structured output is the news bulletins. In a way, I think this shows that Exposure did achieve its aim of emulating a professional station as we all pulled together to make sure that all of our content was planned and structured, which is what the teams at BBC Radio Wales do. However, we were similar to the community stations in the respect that due to the number of people producing shows, every set show, such as the AM to PM, sounded different. BBC Radio Wales have a small team that works to broadcast content all over the country, but because their team is small, they are all familiar with how each show is supposed to sound, and they work together so that each set show, like the breakfast show for example, follows a certain pattern and sounds similar each day.
You're listening to AM to PM on Exposure.
Exposure News, keeping you covered.
Do you need a place where you can relax with your friends and have a drink or some food after lectures? Or maybe you would like your haircut at a student price or buy uni essentials when you have run out? Then why not head down to Treforest Student Union? They offer facilities such as a sports bar, hair salon, cafe, uni shop, student learning suite, support services, beauty room, quiet lounge and even a letting agency. The whole building has Wi-Fi access and a sun terrace. Treforest Student Union, a social hub designed for every student's needs.
The station sound was a big part of Exposure. We allocated a station sound team to create infomercials and jingles during our shows, and I think they turned out brilliantly. They used a mixture of upbeat and slow beat music depending on what was appropriate for what the infomercial was about. All of the infomercials were aimed at students really, as they offered a lot of student services, so I think we could have done a few things that weren't just for students, so that they were aimed at all of Exposure's target audience. On the other hand, however, infomercials were created to promote the Phoenix and Tequila Radio, so we did have some infomercials that were for everybody in the end. Exposure's music policy was also part of station sound. A wide range of music was collected and separated into a few separate playlists, which were oldies, rock and dance, alternative, specialist and covers, and the final playlist consisted of current music. An automated playlist was used, but we still ended up with the majority of songs played being older songs. A few songs also seemed to get selected by the system repeatedly. At times, selecting appropriate music was an issue, particularly when opening and closing shows. In the case of the pitched programme that I co-produced with Amy Dunbavand, I think we chose very appropriate music, with good opening and closing songs that were relevant to our shows. However, there were times when action had to be taken to stop inappropriate music being played. For example, one show had a guest in the studio to chat about mental illness, and one of the songs queued up to play was Green Day's Basket Case, which was obviously inappropriate. I think stopping something like this demonstrates a good sense of station management because it shows forward thinking. Thanks to the help of Google Analytics, we can see just how successful Exposure was. The graph shows that their website had over 1,000 visits and almost 300 people tuning in for the last day of broadcast. These results have prompted me to think that Exposure must have been a successful project, especially since we had people from other countries visiting our website. The graph shows that the station seemed more popular on Fridays, with a big drop on 2 weekends, which which is to be expected because we didn't broadcast on weekends. We can see that the largest proportion of listening was done in Wales, which isn't too surprising as Exposure was broadcast from Wales. What's surprising is the fact that 913 visits were from people in England over the last 2 weeks of broadcast, which must have been the result of constant updates on our social media accounts and word of mouth travelling far and fast. Overall, I'm glad that the Exposure project was successful, as I really enjoyed participating and putting my hard work into it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation.